processor in conjunction with quality of lens.
Exactly. So when we sell you a camera, all of our cameras are 4K cameras. There's still a difference in quality and there's still a difference in price. So when we look at sort of our good, better, best lineup, the way I like to describe this as, the first camera is to say, is there someone in the backyard? You and I can stand out there and you're not going to know who's who. It's just, hey, there's somebody in the backyard. They're not supposed to be. I have cause for alarm. The second image quality is more of saying like, okay, I think that if they were standing close to the camera, I could tell the difference between one person and another, but that's only maybe out to 6 feet or so. But this gives me a better idea of like what type of car is in the driveway. Is it a truck or a car or whatever, versus just it's a vehicle. Once you get to the third camera, at that point you can pretty much tell who someone is as long as it's the daytime and they're reasonably close, 10, 15 feet from the camera. The top end camera is something where you say, hey, even if it's nighttime or low light conditions, I want really high resolution night vision. With this, you can even zoom in and read the license plate on the car. So in terms of the good, better, best lineup, when we look at the pricing, what we'll see is that with the basic camera, you're looking at about $140 a camera, which is not too bad, and about $600 for the recording device. Then you go up to $240 a camera, $800 for the recording device, $400 for a camera, and then all the way up to $750 a camera with $1,000 for the recording device.
So what's priority for me in this particular situation is I want quality on this. This
Okay.
is for my family, so I want to make sure that I actually have good quality security cameras in that regard.
Okay.
Like for example, in regards to this, the theater room, this is more important to me. I could care less about the theater room.
Gotcha.
I put money into this rather than that.
Okay, so it makes more sense from what you're saying, instead of going with like a $3,000 or $5,000 camera package, to go ahead and go with like a $9,000 camera package.
Because, this is to carry my home. Kids and wife are at home. If I'm at home, I need to know what's going on. I need to know that we have everything on file. And God forbid something happens.
Okay, perfect. That makes sense. In that case, we'll go ahead and go with camera package option A, and that's going to bring us up to about $37,000.
Yes.
All right. We've got some flexible conduits here that are for future proofing, in case one day you need to run a fiber optic wire to the family room or something. I'm not too concerned with that right now. That's more when we're in environments where it's going to be where either we can't get the right wires or it's going to be difficult to in the future. I don't think that really applies so much. Here's the next area is the actual televisions themselves. So for right now, we don't need to worry so much about what size TV or the cost of the TV. We can sort of deal with that a little bit later when it comes closer to the move-in time for you. The main idea is, getting all of the TVs wired for, so that we can get those, make sure that you can put a TV there if you want to, and then also having the labor and the tilt mounts and stuff like that, so that whenever the TVs are ready to be mounted, we've got that included in the pricing. So we've got that there. Again, projector for media room. This is something where if we wanted to, we could do a projector. I've already included a basic TV in the media room, so we could go with a 85-inch TV instead of a projector, and that's an area we can save money so that we can spend that on the cameras versus the theater room, for example. All right. TV back boxes we don't necessarily need. Video distribution, that's a specific situation. If you had 30 TVs in your house and you only want to buy 2 cable boxes, we could distribute those cable boxes out to all the TVs. I don't think we need to worry about that for this particular situation.
Not big on having a bunch of TVs in my house.
Yeah. All right, we're getting towards the end here. Next on the list is going to be the remote controls. So the idea here is that you could just use your iPhone or your iPad to control everything in the house, and there's nothing wrong with that. But every once in a while, you sit down and you like to be able to just pick up the remote and hit volume down. So this represents a convenience, but it also represents an area in which we can save money if we need to stay within budget or something like that.
Okay.
So a lot of times people say, well, hey, if a friend came over, I'm not going to hand them my iPhone to run my house. I like to have a basic remote so my friend could sit down, pick up the remote, and watch TV. So for that reason, we typically select, the master bed, the media, the game room, and the family room as the areas that receive those remote controls. All right. So that's going to put us at about $49,800. next item on the list is going to be the touch panels. So again, this is something where you can use an iPad if you want, and the functionality is going to be identical.
Okay.
So the big question then is, okay, well, why would anybody ever want to buy an expensive touch panel if you can just run around the house using iPads all day?
I'm curious about this.
So conceptually, I used an iPad in my house for quite some time, a couple of months, and then I finally broke down and spent the money and bought the touch panel. And the reason for that was because, first of all, the iPad was never where I left it. Somebody else in the house, aka my wife, would always walk off into the other room with it. Second problem is it was never charged. I'm very religious about charging my phones and iPads, but not everyone is. So every time I finally found the iPad to be able to turn down the volume or turn up the temperature or lower the shades or turn on the TV, not only did I have to go on the hunt to figure out where it was, but then I went to use it and it wasn't charged, and so I couldn't. So what we ended up doing was we ended up putting a touch panel in the kitchen to where now, whenever I grab a glass of wine and I want to turn down the music and lower the shades and turn up the lights a little bit and change the channel on the TV, it's always there, it's always charged, and it only takes a second for me to tap on it and do whatever I need to do. The other thing is that an iPad is specifically engineered to be obsolete after a certain number of years so that you always have to buy a new one. That's just the nature of Apple products. Whereas these touch panels, you could have that in your house for 10 years, and you don't have to worry about it. Also, a touch panel is a purpose-built device. It is meant to control your home and not to surf the web and play video games and check your email and everything else. So that means it's much more reliable than using an iPad in certain instances where people have got 25 apps open, and you don't have to constantly worry about iOS updates being up to date and stuff like that.
Okay.
But you can still use an iPad if you prefer.
I think the iPad would probably be best for the kitchen only.
Okay.
I would say probably the main entertainment room, main room, like the living room, something like that. Those would be the only two areas I could think of actually having one.
Okay.
Yeah, because everything else is kind of like, that would probably work best for just those two. Set the mood in the kitchen, set the mood in the
Okay. So let me ask you a question. Overall, I think we're about 2/3 of the way through, and we're about almost at $50,000. How are we doing in terms of the overall budget? So I want to be sure to steer us towards things that are going to not push us over.
Well, so I know we're actually over right now, but I feel like most of the stuff we've got is just standard requirements of certain things, as well as minimizing some things as well. Like I said, I don't need that much in the theater room. Security is high priority, so I want to take that into account. And everything else at this point is, let's say like kind of a little bit more what I'm expecting. It is a little over budget, but that's pretty much. And then after the pads, is probably about it. I mean,
Okay.
at the time, just for surround sound security, and that's really it.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's do this. Let's hold off on the touch panels for now, and the reason why is because we can as long as we've wired for them, we can always come back and add them later, and they're not any more expensive to add them after the fact.
Okay, let's go after that.
Also, in the rooms that you mentioned that you might want them for media control, I would argue that it's actually easier to control your media from a remote control sitting on the couch than to have to get up from the couch and go over to a touch panel to turn down the volume or change what you're watching.
Okay.
So if we've got the remotes, I'd like to test it and see if that's sufficient. We might save some money on the touch panels, and if it's not, it doesn't cost us any extra to go ahead and add them later.
Now, for the lighting controls, we set the wiring. Could we go back to add those later on as well?
So lighting control, there's two different versions. If you wire the house, if the electrician wires the house normally with normal light switches, we can always come back at any time and just simply change out the normal Home Depot light switch for a smart dimmer, and that'll give you control over the light.
Okay.
However, think of areas like your kitchen and your living room that have like 6 or 7 of those light switches all next to each other on the wall, and it doesn't necessarily look nice. We do have a hardwired lighting control option where the electrician wires the house differently, and we can eliminate that wall clutter and just have a single nice lighting keypad instead of 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 switches on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not something you can go back and do later. I can give you control over all those light switches later, but you're still going to have 7 or 8 smart dimmers on the wall. If you want to eliminate the wall clutter, that's money you have to spend in the beginning and wire the house differently.
So the money I would have to pay now to make sure to set myself up later.
Well, you'd have to not only pay now in order to wire it differently, but you'd have to sort of financially commit to the purchase of that lighting control system, because once you wire for that type of lighting control system, there's not a way for that to work off of normal light switches.
So you either go on or go out.
It's sort of an all or nothing. Now, that being the case, there is the concept of using a hybrid system to save a little bit of money. So let's say, as an example, that we target the areas that have the most visibility downstairs. So the dining room, the kitchen, the family room, the butler's pantry, etc. These are the high visibility areas where if a guest came over, they'd see 7 or 8 light switches on the wall and it would look kind of ugly. Mm-hmm. We could do just those main entertaining areas as a hardwired lighting control system and leave the entire rest of the house as normal light switches, because your guests aren't going to necessarily go up into the 3rd bedroom and look at how many light switches you have on the wall. That would save us money and give you the benefit of the hardwired lighting system. And then later on down the road, after you've paid for the house and all the furniture and all these other good things in life, you could come back and say, hey, I love lighting control so much, let's add a few more rooms to the lighting control system upstairs, and those could be the rooms where we use the wireless smart dimmers that don't have to be wired specially.
Can we scroll back up on what we have so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So do you want to just sort of do a quick run through of everything?
Yeah.
So to just touch on it briefly, you've got a main system processor that's about $3,000. That's the brain that runs everything. You've got an equipment rack that's about $1,600, and so far that's about on par with the selections we're making. Mm-hmm. We have an optional $1,200 component here. That's the managed outlets for the remote serviceability. Mm-hmm. If we wanted to save some money, that's something that is not necessary for the system to operate.
Okay, and we can always come back to that if we want to.
Yeah, absolutely. We can always come back and add that in.
So let me take that off.
Okay. So that brought us from 49 down to 48. The network, that's going to be the router and network switch that all the devices communicate through. We've got our background music system, which we've got 10 rooms of audio currently. We've got our surround sound zones in the family room, the game room, and the media room. We've got the premium cameras. That's going to be 8 of the highest resolution cameras with the best lens optics and the best sensors. We've got the TVs all set up to be mounted, and we're going to select the actual TVs at a later date. Mm-hmm. And then we've also got the remote controls for the main areas, such as the master bedroom, the media room, the game room, and the family room.
Okay. All right, that works. Very much everything is in conjunction with everything, nothing too unnecessary or, so at that point.
Absolutely.
Okay. And...
Got a few more categories left.
Yeah, let's go through those real quick and see where we're at.
All right. So next on the list is window shades. Now this is where I can throw a little bit of a curveball that might help. Most often, from what homeowners have told me, the window shades don't come out of the audio video technology budget, they come out of the interior design budget. So usually people have budgeted for some form of window treatment, and that's its own budget. So we typically separate these out and give you a separate proposal for that, because that comes out of a different budget. So that's something that we can discuss a little bit later. But essentially the idea is, if you want to have automated window treatments that work with your system, we would need to provide those versus like a company that just supplies shades. Yeah. And you can get the same quality and the same brands. It's just that we'll know which versions to order so that we can program them and integrate them to work with your system. Okay. Next on the list is going to be telephone and LAN wires. Most people don't really use a landline telephone anymore unless you're a doctor and you are looking at medical records and you need a fax for HIPAA compliance or something like that. However, if you were going to have an elevator in your house, or if you have 2 pantries stacked above each other, like a pantry downstairs and a closet upstairs that are intentionally built that way so that you could have a future elevator, building code would require us to wire for a telephone for the future elevator to pass inspection. Battery backup, again, this is something that protects the entire rack of equipment against having too much power, having not enough power, and having no power.
So I read up about this, especially with, just helps cycle the energy when it's actually being turned back on. So basically it's a huge surge protector.
It is a huge surge protector. Now, this is another thing that's important, is a lot of clients think that if they get a backup generator installed in their house, that means they no longer need this component.
Can I interject?
Yes.
But the thing is, it's required, because the thing is, that it takes a couple of minutes to turn on the backup generator. The influx energy is so much where it can actually short circuit some things. So this is why you have this to lighten the load on the device devices that are directly affected within it.
100% correct. It's that inrush current from when the generator kicks on that this protects
So
against.
basically, this is your warranty.
Exactly. Exactly.
So we're at the-
All right, perfect. Thermostats nowadays, most smart thermostats come with your HVAC system, so this isn't a huge necessity. But if your builder has supplied basic Honeywell thermostats or something like that aren't smart, as long as they're using a standard 5 or 7 wire conductor, we can replace those with wireless smart thermostats at a later date, and give you control over those, put them on a schedule, everything else. So that's not something we need to review right now unless you have questions about it.
No, but anything at this point of the different sections that we're going over, if we can come back to actually add, and we don't have to do anything like pre-wiring or the setup prior, then we'll just wait till later.
Perfect, perfect. So I'm going to touch on one or two of those as I whiz to the bottom for you. Doorbell is something you definitely want to pre-wire for, but again, you can install the doorbell later. You want to avoid wireless doorbells because they're a security risk.
Yeah, of course.
Pool control is a single $45 wire that we run, depending on what type of swimming pool you install, whether it's a Jandy Aqualink RS or a Pentair or Goldline pool controls or Hayworth or whatever else. That's going to determine what specific parts we need to control your swimming pool.
Gotta get with wife now.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell all that is.
Exactly. It gives you the ability to see the temperature of the swimming pool, to set the swimming pool, to control the jacuzzi, bubbles, water jets, color of the lights, any function your pool has, it gives you the ability to control it. Garage door control is a nice to have. Again, a lot of LiftMaster motors, if they're the MyQ series, they'll have a free app that you can use, but some don't, in which case we can run special wires and add parts that would give you feedback if you left your garage door open. You can control it from your phone, things like that. Same thing with car gate control, if you needed a J-pole to punch in a code when you pulled up to the house, pedestrian gates, etc. Distributed antenna systems, typically that's for extremely large residences or people who have a metal roof, etc. We run some very expensive wires, and basically that allows us to rebroadcast the cellular signal from the nearest cell phone tower into the house and rebroadcast the signal from your cell phone out to the nearest cellular tower, in case you don't get any signal once the house is built. The unfortunate aspect of that is there's no way to measure in advance if you're going to need that because it has to do with the house once it's built. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of a gamble as to whether you need that or not. Mm-hmm. Almost to the end here, wireless access points. So the idea is we want to run wires pretty much everywhere for these. And we may end up only using certain ones, but that's okay because the wire gets buried behind the sheetrock. But the idea is if we wire for 12 access points, it's not because we necessarily think we'll need 12, it's because there's 12 potential locations where an access point may need to be positioned in order to get you the optimal signal for however many you have. Okay. So that would be the idea there.
Where would we need it specifically? By on a standard basis, what would we need those?
It does depend a little bit on the blueprints, but for sure you want to include any media room. So family rooms, game rooms, theater rooms.
So the rooms basically we have with designated sound areas. Basically.
Exactly. Any surround sound zone, you're typically going to have a lot of media devices, so you want good Wi-Fi there because clients are going to sit there and homeowners are going to sit there, friends are going to sit there, and everybody's going to be using their iPhones to control things, iPads, etc. Any sort of study or office, typically, your kitchen, you want to make sure you have a good, strong signal in the kitchen. Now, of course, if the living room or family room and the kitchen is all one big open area, one is sufficient to cover that whole space as long as it's open. Back porch and outdoor area is also very important. If you go to control your volume from your iPhone and you're out at the pool and you have spotty Wi-Fi, that can actually cause an issue because you start hitting volume up and then you lose signal and it keeps pressing the button. Other areas are just bedrooms upstairs. If you have kids that are going to be doing homework and stuff like that, typically they'll need to be able to get online and things of that nature. So that's really it for the most part. Now, when it comes to security, what we prefer to do is, unless you have very advanced security needs, we just connect you directly with our security expert, and that saves you spending money with us as a middleman. we don't need to manage that process. If you say, hey, I've got house staff with key fobs and key readers, and they need to be, locked out of the master suite, they're this east wing of the house on these days at this period of time, we can do those advanced things, and that's when we really have to do a lot of coordination efforts. But otherwise, all of your standard, wired and monitored smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, glass breaks, motion detectors, keypads, alarm sirens, magnets for windows and doors that open and close to make the system beep, all that stuff that person can take care of. And you're getting the same parts and the same quality of installation, whether you do it through us or directly with him. We're just trying to save you a little bit of money there.
Yeah, okay.
And that's about it. So all the rest of these items are just security related. So with that, we're at about $49,807. And the breakdown of that is as follows. We've got about $34,500, almost $35,000 in equipment. We've got about $3,000 in sales tax. We've got about $11,000 in installation labor and programming. And then we've got about $800 shipping and freight.
Cool. So we're in the line item right here. That's a good thing. All right.
There you go.